How many men to change a light bulb now, is it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Evening members, evening officers, thank you for your attendance tonight at the Staffing Matters and Review Subcommittee. We've got 4 items on the agenda, the main one of which is to look at the test and trace support payment policy. We'll kick things off. There are no apologies. We're a full house of members this evening. Do I have any declarations of interest from any member? No member is indicating. Thank you, members. Agenda item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 22nd of September. Are there any matters arising from members with the minutes? No, in which case I will ask members to unmute themselves and we will take a recording of the vote on the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Smith?
In favour.
Councillor Baggott?
In favour.
Councillor Headley?
Agreed.
And I vote in favour as well. Thank you, members. That is carried. Agenda item 4, which is the agenda supplement that was emailed to members, is the test and trace discretionary payment scheme. And I'm going to ask Rob to introduce the report. Rob?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to present this as a report to you at such short notice. We only received the detail regarding this new initiative on the 30th of September, so it's been a few busy days to get to where we are now. This matter has been brought to this committee to be dealt with under the urgent decision provision rules with the Council's constitution. And the government has set down a requirement for 2 payment schemes to be administered by the council to help control of the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. The 2 schemes are the test and trace payment scheme, the standard scheme, and test and trace discretionary scheme, which is a discretionary scheme for the council. And the committee is being asked to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Resources to finalise and implement the Basildon Test and Trace Discretionary Payment Scheme. So the government set down requirements for 2 payment schemes to be administered by the council to help control the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. The payments are intended to support people told to self-isolate by the NHS Test and Trace that are on low incomes and are unable to work from home. The hope is that these payments will ensure that those who have tested positive and their close contacts may have will self-isolate to help stop further transmission of the COVID-19. The test and trace payment schemes start from the 28th of September, and we have to have arrangements in place to administer payments to our customers from the 12th of October, so from next Monday. And at present time, the scheme is running up until currently the 31st of January 2021, although if things change, that date may also change. So there are 2 schemes. The first is the mandatory test and trace standard scheme, and individuals can apply for this scheme if they are in a period of self-isolation, that they meet the criteria as in the report in front of you, and they can receive a £500 payment. They have to be in receipt of a qualifying state benefit. Again, isolating, can't work from home, and in employment. So that's very much in a nutshell the standard scheme. The difference between that and a discretionary scheme, which is what we need to bring in for Basildon Council, is that the discretionary scheme is where the customer still has to self-isolate due to COVID-19. They can't work from home. They'll lose income as a result. They are in employment or self-employment, but they're not entitled to a qualifying benefit. The qualifying benefits, just to run through very quickly for you, are, let's get my right page, sorry, bear with me. In receipt of housing benefit, income support, income-based job seekers allowance, income-related employment and support allowance, working tax credit, pension credit, or universal credits. So they're very much the benefits that top up income for people who are working or not working. So to meet Basildon's criteria for a test and trace payment under the discretionary scheme, customers must undertake a process of establishing entitlement to one of these qualifying benefits. They don't physically have to be in receipt of or claiming one of those benefits, but they must be able to demonstrate that if they were to apply, they would be entitled to this additional income from one of those benefits whilst they're in that self-isolating period of 2 weeks. I say this process will be, we walk them through this process when these customers apply, and my staff make sure they fully support them. If the indication is that they would not qualify for one of these benefits, it would mean that their income would be too high to claim these benefits and too high to claim this discretionary payment for those 2 weeks. If they would qualify for one of these benefits, then discretionary payment of £500 would be made, and the customer, if they so wish, would also be fully supported through the application process. For the standard scheme, the scheme is fully funded by government, and they are going to revise and review those payments depending on the requirement for it. But if discretionary funding has been confirmed as being a finite pot of money, and we can't exceed paying that amount of money, the finite pot is £53,000 for discretionary payments, and that works out to 106 individual payments for customers of £500 each for those who aren't entitled to the standard scheme and receiving qualifying benefits. There's 2 options. The options is to approve the test and trace discretionary payment scheme as set out in enclosure number 1, which is the preferred option as it creates opportunities to support people through these challenging times. Or the option is to do nothing, but it's not recommended, as the scheme would be delivered without member oversight and based on national guidance not supported by local policy. There are 2 recommendations. The first is that the committee approve the test and trace discretionary scheme as set out in enclosure number 1, and that the committee delegates authority to the Council's Assistant Director of Resources with any requirements to amend the scheme in line with government guidance when it changes. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring you in a moment, Councillor Baggott. Just a couple of quick points, Rob, from me. If a person is told to self-isolate, then they're told to self-isolate for a period of 14 days at present. Just to confirm, it will be one payment of £500 to cover the full 14 days. Is that correct?
That's right, per person. So it could be multiple people within the household. And they
Okay.
have to have been tested positive for COVID and have a tested positive number from the NHS, or be linked to a group that have tested positive and they've been informed they must isolate.
Okay. And so we will work with the NHS to be able to recognise those numbers, NHS numbers, when they come in, yeah?
Yes, so over the last 3 days, we've been working through data protection and different bits and pieces, as you can imagine. But one of those is to have access to the NHS test and trace system, so we can see that the number the customers are providing to us are a true number and they have been told to self-isolate.
Okay. Next point from me is I've obviously seen some of the figures around the number of people who have applied for hardship payments, exceptional hardship payments during the last quarter, etc. And I would think we would be prudent. I know it's coming to PNR anyway at the next PNR, but I think we should perhaps circulate those details to all 42 members so that they can see exactly where we are at this moment in time on that. But my question would be, given the kind of numbers that we're looking at for, say, for example, council tax reduction applications, hardship fund, exceptional hardship payments, how confident are we that 106 individual payments will be enough, especially given we are approaching the winter months and we are approaching, we'll talk about this in a moment, but we're talking about a time where infection rates are doubling almost every day in Essex at the moment. How confident are we that 106 is enough in terms of those number of payments? And is there any recourse for us to perhaps go to government and, if needs be, lobby for more than 53k?
We've raised these questions, and we raise these questions on a regular basis, because they have said for the standard scheme they review it on a regular basis. After discussing this week, they finally came out yesterday and said, sorry, the government came out yesterday and said that they will now review the discretionary payments if they need to, but at the moment it's a finite pot. Whether it's enough as a finite pot for us, whether it's enough 108 people, I don't honestly know. From my perspective, we know that we have money, we can help people, and we will help as many as we can. Hopefully, this will give us the opportunity to be able to support our customers in other ways, and not just with the £500 payment, but to support them with council tax reduction, with help with their rent, with help with other benefits and support that's available within the borough.
Okay, so is our working assumption that this 53k takes us to the 31st of January, or are we working on the assumption it might have to extend perhaps into the spring?
At the moment, the scheme's been confirmed only until the 31st of January, and the £53,000 is up until the 31st of January, unless something drastic happens.
Okay.
But again, there's a caveat at the end that if things change, they may extend the scheme.
Okay.
In which case, I would expect them to extend the funding.
Fine. Councillor Baggott.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the team and of officers that have worked on this and appreciate the effort you've put in. And of course, we should also be thanking the government that they're addressing an issue which is very important for those that are likely to be the hardest hit in the community on this. So in that way, I think it's good news all round. The risk of teaching people to suck eggs, I guess the thing now is the efficiency of people being able to process those payments and that if they're in need of how it works from them speaking to somebody, because obviously they can't leave the house, going through the necessary hoops in order to get it, and then receiving that particular money. And of course, I've got great faith in the team of officers that will go well. And I'm sure that if there are any snags or whatever, members will be made aware. I do think it's a shame, though, that something as important as this has come to a committee with a handful of people when we should be having full council meetings and everything else. And I noticed that the leader of the council, Councillor Callaghan, is quoted that the reason we're not having council meetings is because of the behaviour of the Conservative group, which is a complete utter nonsense. If he's running scared of being challenged on issues surrounding his administration, then maybe he should be honest about that rather than going to the press and pretending that he suspended democracy on the basis of the spurious reason of the behaviour of members. Once again, thank you to the officer's support.
Councillor Baggott, for once, this isn't about you. This is about helping some of the most vulnerable people who are suffering from coronavirus in our borough. So I know that you have to grandstand at these things because the number of knives in your back are growing every day.
You know all about grandstanding, and that's why you've suspended democracy in Basildon, Councillor. That's why you can't have meetings. That's why you have to have a 3-line whip on even the simplest of decisions within your group. It's why you can't be held to account at council meetings, Councillor.
Okay. You know perfectly well, because 10 days ago, this exact same group of people met to talk about how we finalise the full council meeting for the 22nd of October. Nobody from the administration, no officer, nobody has cancelled any meeting. And in fact, you were sent a paper earlier on today to talk about that very issue at the conclusion of this meeting, that group leaders will meet at the conclusion of this meeting with the mayor on the call to finalise the arrangements. There is no doubt that this is a very difficult thing for members, for officers, in terms of how we conduct the business of the council. This council has held more remote meetings than arguably any other council in England over the course of the pandemic. So it is an affront to both the administration and to the hard work of the officers that you then try to grandstand in the way that you have. The focus of councillors on this call now needs to be on how we can quickly get money into the pockets of vulnerable people who are suffering from coronavirus. Not how many times Councillor Baggott can grandstand in a 30-second piece.
Which I'm sure we'll do. But it didn't stop you grandstanding in the Echo today, did it? And sending out messages of lies and being disingenuous to the public. And this is an opportunity to actually, for those people that are watching, to set the record straight on the fact that why it is that council meetings, which are important because they reflect on dealing with the vulnerable people and everything else, and why decisions are being made by a handful of members rather than the 42 members that are elected to this council.
Okay, so on a substantive point, if you read the report, you'll realise that this is a time-sensitive issue, hence why an emergency meeting of the Staffing Matters Committee has been convened. So there is a need for us to get on and pass this policy so we can get the money into the pockets of people who need it quickly. When it comes to the issue of full council meetings, I say it again, nobody from the council, no councillor has said anything about cancelling the 22nd of October full council meeting, and it is utterly disingenuous to suggest anything else. We will deal with that issue at the conclusion of this meeting, as was agreed unanimously with you just 10 days ago when the Staffing Matters Committee met last time. But I'm going to move on now because there are far more important things here than whether or not you wish to grandstand further. Councillor Headley, you have indicated.
Oh. Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of points on clarification? It's 153,000, which will cover 106 payments, did you say?
Yeah, so it's £53,000 at £500 each, so it's 106 payments for the discretionary scheme. Well, we do expect the majority of these customers to be falling into the standard scheme. So this really should be to support those who shouldn't really slip between the cracks. That's the whole point of it.
Okay, so that's a relatively small number, and this funding is coming through from government. Okay, so is there anything that precludes Basildon from topping it up with, say, match funding if the number goes above 106?
Can I let Owen answer that, please?
I mean, obviously, from the resourcing perspective and how that be financed.
Tony, you're on mute.
Sorry, I did unmute it, but I think it's important that this council is seen to support particularly those residents that are already trying very hard to make ends meet. And I would certainly encourage the council to either match fund, or at least if we got 30 or 40 claimants above that number, it'd be quite invidious to have to choose who you give the payment to. I mean, it may be that the government's grant will cover the payments. I mean, no one knows. It's very difficult to understand how quickly there could be a spike in Basildon. But if one member of the family, gets a positive test, my understanding is the rest of the family have to isolate. So you could have 2 or 3 wage earners or people potentially in one family wanting to make that claim. The government is doing its best countrywide, but I think it's incumbent on this council to at least consider topping up that payment if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Headley. I'm just trying to, on my screen here, load up P&R. So what I would say is that Rob and Owen, there is an opportunity on the 3rd of December, which this committee would, this report would have gone to the P&R committee anyway if we weren't up against the clock in order to get this money out. That presents an opportune moment if it's not too late in the day, because we also do have one in a couple of weeks' time on the 21st of October. If we are seeing a real surge and we are seeing a need to top that 53,000 up any further, then there is an opportunity to come back to that P&R on the 3rd of December to do that. Clearly, the government's guesstimate is that this 53,000 will be enough to cover until the end of January. But it's a good point that we'll continuously monitor this, and if needs be, then I would suggest it comes to that P&R on the 3rd of December for us to take a look at, and where necessary, allocate some more of the council funding to it. So I thank Councillor Headley for that. Councillor Harrison had indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Did Mr. Manser indicate that we have access to the test and trace system? I thought he did. If he did, have we some idea then of the numbers currently in the borough, which overall, which would include those for the standard scheme, and we get, to some idea of numbers. But can I add to that also, I must congratulate Mr. Manser and his team for the work they've done, not just over the whole period. It's been exceptional. And I'll just comment on Councillor Baggott wanting council meetings. If he wanted a council meeting, there was nothing to stop any group putting in for an additional council meeting as in the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a question for yourself to Rob Manser. Now, we all understand why there has been a lot of issues with test and trace, which is a key part of the money being awarded if that person flags up during the test and trace process. What assurances do we have now going forward there will not be the problems we've had? So the test and trace actually does what it's meant to do.
I'm going to, on that particular issue, perhaps Scott, because you're on the test and trace board for Essex, you might want to comment on that.
Yeah, to the 2 points really from both councillors is that Rob is working up the data sharing protocol, which I will sign off as chief executive, and it's about sharing data. So as and when people, David, as I understand it, as and when people are tested positive in this area, will be sent that information. So it'll be a data share as and when. We won't necessarily know from that whether they're on the benefit. So that's not the purpose of it. So it will just be a positive case that with Rob's team then will pick up then if that person then is entitled through a claim for the payment. So that's how we think it will work. In terms of the test and trace generally to the other councillor's point, Councillor Smith's point there is actually the Essex test and trace payment system is working quite well. Only on the outbreak board this week that it is one of the best in the country at the moment, I'm told by the Director of Public Health from Essex County. So we are responding quite positively to the test and trace in the South East.
Thank you, Scott, for that. I think also it is just worth, in conclusion on this item, reiterating the points. Thanks to Rob and the Revenue and Benefits team for the way in which you're quickly getting this stuff out. I believe you're still accelerating the payment runs as well to enable money to reach pockets quicker, which is, again, a very welcome move. An emergency meeting has been called tomorrow morning with the leaders from across Essex to discuss the infection rate because it is rising in Essex across the board, and we do need to take measures to ensure that our borough and our county is not forced into any of the more severe lockdown measures that we have seen anywhere else in the country. Nobody wants that to happen. So it's absolutely imperative, and better late than never really when it comes to this scheme, that actually people who do have the virus are not risking their families' health and safety, but also that of their co-workers and their co-workers' health and safety by going to work unnecessarily. They will be able to get some financial support now that will mean hopefully that they can follow the rules, self-isolate, and that we will limit the spread of this virus in our borough. Basildon, let's not forget, was the fastest to get people back to work anywhere in the UK. That's a tremendous effort on behalf of the environmental health team to work with all of our businesses across Basildon to make that happen. And let's make sure that this information, Scott, is getting to the BBG so that they can inform their partners. We can inform businesses across the borough of this scheme and how their staff, if they are infected, may be eligible to get in touch with the council so that the message gets out there that people are not having to go to work unnecessarily and risking themselves. Scott, you want to come back on that?
Message relayed yesterday, so BBG was yesterday, so they are aware of the scheme. And don't forget which I think Rob is due to bring back as quickly as possible, is around also those businesses that need to close during the pandemic will also be support for those as well. So that will follow shortly. Yeah,
very good. Okay, members, the recommendations are on page 4 of the supplementary agenda. If I can ask you to unmute yourselves as we go to the vote. Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Baggott.
In favour.
Councillor Headley.
Agreed.
And I vote in favour. So the recommendations are carried unanimously. That concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you, members. I'll ask you to just hang fire for a moment. Thank you, officers, Rob and Owen and Karina, if we could now end the